Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm founder of a small digital conference in Vienna called Darwin Circle. And 2 months ago, we had this conference in Vienna, and Steffi Czerny was guest of our conference. She was speaker. And after the conference, she invited me to host a panel here together with her in the thinking of cooperation between conferences. And when I told her that I have no idea what a small conference like Darwin Circle could contribute to a huge thing like DLD, we were having a discussion about what is the thing about small and big. And we then had this idea of discussing this difference between the origin in a small country like our conference and a big country like Germany and DLD. And we then had the idea to invite outstanding companies from those small countries to debate what's the difference if you establish a company in a country like Austria or Switzerland compared to establishing a company in the US, in China, or in Germany. So this was the idea of this panel. This is how it all happened. And then I also had this idea to invite someone who has an expertise on looking at those things, like Mona from I5 Invest, who just recently released a unicorn report, where we can find the biggest unicorns in Europe. And this is what we will discuss today. But first, I would like to introduce all of you so that you know who we are talking today. I will start with Philippe from Switzerland. Philippe, you're the founder of Yokoy, which is now one of the superstars of Swiss and European fintechs. You just did an 80 million Series B investment round with Sequoia leading the round. Can you tell us a little bit about your company so that everybody knows what you're doing?
Yes, sure. Thanks a lot for having me. Yokoy is a spend management platform. I mean, like, spend management was hyped last year, especially in venture capital. They're the European players everyone knows, Spendesk, Pleo, basically targeting smaller companies and automating the entire spend management, so invoices, cards, and expenses. And what we have done is we said, there's so many players challenging that small company area. There really needs to be one challenger for enterprise and for the middle segment. And that's what we've done. So Yokoy is automating spend management for mid-size to enterprise level customers.
Thank you. I will come back to you, Simona, in 1 second, because I will start with you with the question, but then I will first go to Philippe. Philippe, you're a member of the managing board of COPA-DATA, a company which many people have never heard of, but you've just been valuated with more than 1 billion, so you're a real unicorn now. Maybe you can also tell us a little bit about your company.
Sure, thanks Nico. Glad to be here. So we're a B2B software company operating in the space of smart factory for mainly manufacturing firms and smart energy grids. And our customers are facing the exact challenges we also heard yesterday on the big stage, and we all know are the big challenges of this century. How can manufacturing become more sustainable? How can we go forward in dealing with producing goods in a sustainable way? How can we manage that transition away from the fossil fuel age towards renewable energies? And we provide a piece of software that makes our users makes it a bit easier for them to tackle those challenges. And it's an exciting space to be in, because yeah, it affects all of our lives at the end of the day. So it's.
And maybe to add up, a lot of your customers, everybody knows, right? So
a lot of our customers, everybody knows. So if you happen to be driven around in one of the DLD shuttles, the local champions, BMW, every one of those cars is manufactured in some process. Our software was involved in that process. If you drink from a bottle or can today, is an 80 or 90% chance that this was manufactured on a machine where our software is running on. So we're here, and yeah.
Mona, you just recently published your unicorn report. We will come back to this shortly. But within your key competence, you're a partner at i5 Invest, which is a leading M&A company and partner for tech companies based in Vienna. But you work, I think, in all countries, also in Germany. Can you explain a little bit about this as well?
Sure. So basically, i5 Invest is a tech investor, a venture builder, M&A advisor. I know that's a lot of things at the same time. So what that actually means is that we basically work with outstanding tech companies all across their life cycles. So starting very early, which is where we typically like to invest. When we invest, we have a very sort of hands-on approach in really supporting the companies in our portfolio with all things related growth. And then in later stages, we work with companies supporting in setting up strategic partnerships. We have a specific focus on supporting US market entry and like growing heavily on the US market. And we also support with corporate development transactions, which then typically results in an exit of the company that we work with. The majority of the transactions we actually end up doing with the US market. So that's been a bit of a sweet spot of ours. As I said initially, we do a lot of things, but we're also above 60 people at this point ourselves and heavily growing. And thank you very much for having us today on this exciting panel, Nico.
So let's get started. I will start with you. As I said already, you recently published a study about unicorns in Europe. Mm-hmm. And what I would be interesting is there something which you found out about where they are coming from? So is there north, south, big, small? What is the best country for a unicorn to develop?
Historically, the UK. But let me maybe start somewhere else, and also like why we did this. Last year was actually a record-breaking year in a lot of ways. And in Europe, in total, 85 new tech unicorns were created last year. The total number is actually at 130 right now, just to give you a perspective of how much that actually is compared to the total number. And the growth rate at which this happened was actually 2.7 times higher than the rate that unicorns have been growing in the US, and actually much faster than the US has been developing at any given point in the past. And right now in Europe, the number that we have end of last year is actually at the US level of 2019. And that's why we decided that we really want to shine some light on these awesome companies, because I think it's fair to say that European tech has undoubtedly entered the global stage to compete with tech made in Silicon Valley. So we basically investigated all of these, investigated all of these unicorns, and actually also took a closer look at the so-called unicorns. So these are companies that investors expect to have the potential to become a unicorn, so reach a valuation of at least $1 billion in the next 24 months. And coming back to your question, Nico, so historically the best place to be in for a unicorn is definitely the UK. So if you look at the total numbers, UK is followed by Germany, which is followed by France. And then interestingly, in the fourth spot, there is a tie between Austria and Sweden, which have 6 unicorns each. And Sweden, even more interesting, is home to Europe's biggest unicorn, which is Klarna. I'm sure many of you have heard about or even used in the past. It's hard to say if smaller countries. Proportionally, I think there is certain smaller countries that are developing more unicorns. If you, for example, look at the per capita, but there's also smaller countries that have no unicorns, right? So it's a bit hard, sort of like to draw a comparison here between the bigger countries and the smaller countries. But when we're looking at the unicorns, we can definitely see that a lot of smaller countries are catching up. It's still the same top 3. So UK followed by Germany, followed by France with those unicorn companies. But a lot of smaller companies are definitely catching up as well.
Philippe Sahli. Philippe's here, so. I have an assumption, and you can tell me if I'm wrong or right. I have the assumption that if you start a company in a very small country, your perspective gets global from day one, because no business model can scale in small countries like Austria or Switzerland itself. So it's a very small country. Whatever you develop, whatever idea you have, you will not become a unicorn just using your home market, because there are only, especially in the field of B2B, there are only very few companies who can use your tool. So maybe establishing a company in a very small country is even some kind of a competitive advantage from the mindset, because you establish ideas which can become global from day one because you have to. What do you say about this?
Yeah, certainly not from day one. I mean, in the first couple of days or month or probably even year, you would probably want to be where your network is, which is typically where you start the company. And I mean, like, everything I say is really my perspective. We founded Yokoy less than 3 years ago. We turned 3 almost soon. So I might have a little bit a biased view, but for me, I think the statistics that we were hearing makes sense, because starting out in a small country means that you need to go abroad if you really want to play in the big league. And I mean, there are things that are probably not that much different in the UK versus UK, Germany as big countries versus Austria, Switzerland as smaller countries, which is access to capital. I mean, Sequoia found us. Obviously, I reached out to them a lot of times. They never replied. Then once they reached out to me, I did reply. So they reached out to us. They established their hub 2 years ago in London. So they actually came from Silicon Valley to London to establish a European hub. And so access to capital, access to great investors. And I'm not saying that only Sequoia is a great investor. There are many out there. But I mean, for a tech entrepreneur, it's the dream to have Sequoia on board. That's why it was for us so extremely exciting to welcome Sequoia. So access to capital, in my opinion, no big difference, but I think there's a big but there. If you really want to grow 400% year over year and all of that, you're very right. You really need to start expanding very, very early. And I mean, I do believe you have more of a competitive advantage if you're already in a bigger country. Also, that kind of like is proven by there are more unicorns in the UK and in Germany than there are coming from Switzerland, Austria, and because it's just difficult expanding. I mean, like, going to a new country is, even if you start doing it from very early on, it is extremely tough. I mean, you establish basically your entire business again in a new place. And I mean, the more regulated you are, the more it becomes a nightmare. So in the software space, we are spoiled. I mean, like, we are hosting in the EU, and we can access it from everywhere. But when we started going from software into the card business as well, so Yokoy Pay, I mean, then it became so much more complex to go from Switzerland, which is a special case anyway, because we're not part of the EU, outside and establishing exactly that in the EU. So competitive advantage, I would say, in my opinion, I would say no. I would really say it's a competitive advantage if you start in the UK or Germany, and if you already have a network there, which allows you to even start the business in the beginning.
So an advantage for the big ones.
Yes.
Philipp, do you agree with this? I mean, your company is we brought those guys together because they are totally different. I mean, one company found 2019, now over 100 million investment and growing rapidly fast. COPA-DATA is a totally different story. COPA-DATA was founded how many years ago?
In 87.
87, so yes. One of the oldest software companies of Austria. Yeah. What?
1987. 1987. Yeah, yesterday we had some like 350-year-old companies. So.
They are now valuated with more than 1 billion without any financing at all. Just growth, organic growth in the software business, which is an amazing story as well for itself. But you are active all over the world, right? You have yesterday we talked about South Korea, India. You fly around the world and you will work together, China with your European customers.
Yep.
So your software is deployed all over the world. Do you think the story of COPA-DATA would be a different one if it was found in US or in Germany years ago?
Yes, I think that that's like coming back also to your initial question, that if you start in a small market, you have to have this going international mindset from the beginning. Maybe not the very first day literally, but from very early on. And this is also what we did. And I see that it is tougher in the beginning. And so I agree with Philipp's point that you struggle more, because I also experienced this. Entering each market again is like a little founding experience again. There's so many new things to build and to consider, and relationships to grow. But I also think that it embeds some kind of like a learning and growing culture inside your company. So like it's you train harder in the beginning and you see maybe less results, but you develop some competences that pay off later. So you mentioned one of our markets, India, where it's maybe not so easy for a European to do business once you go there in the first place. But being used to always being like never being in your home market, you build this habit of adopting and being very sensitive to what you need to adopt to. And so I think the initial disadvantage, once you grow over it, can actually become an advantage. And what is also not to be underestimated, in my view, is the many language barriers we still have. I mean, here in this room, it's totally natural for us to speak English, and I bet most of you are fluent in 1, 2, 3, or even more other languages. So, but when you're in the B2B space and you talk to a plant manager in Brazil, it's very likely that you don't go far with English. And once you learn these lessons and also embed it into your corporate culture, I think that can become an advantage eventually.
So Yokoy is too young to have experienced my assumption.
Yeah, but that's good to hear. That means that we will have quite an
good
advantage.
Good perspectives
No,
for
but
you.
What I can add on there is probably what certainly is true is that I think our employee number, roughly 50, 51, was an expansion manager. Mm-hmm. And certainly if we were started in Germany or in the UK, we would probably not even have an expansion manager or an expansion team. Now they're 4 people, and that professionally mean they do nothing else than evaluating countries, target markets, entry strategies for us to really plan ahead and to enter countries in parallel.
I just want to add, I think if you're in a small home market, it forces you to early on think about the best possible market for you, which is not necessarily the biggest one, because it really also depends on the business model that you have, which sometimes requires a certain level of technology adaptation, and that's very different across European countries. So the Nordics, for example, they're small countries, but typically it's very easy to sell to them compared to selling to someone in the UK, for example, or selling to Germany. So that's the experience that we've made, that, for example, if you are in Austria, you really need to think about what is the easiest market, not necessarily the biggest one, for me to really start and to show results quickly.
I mean, I just had an idea.
Go on.
I mean, there are 2 big players when it comes to digital banking B2C that emerged, which are Revolut and N26. At least these are the two ones I know very well from Europe. And I mean, they were started in basically Germany.
But you know that the founders of N26
I know,
are two Austrians.
We have to mention that at this point.
We claim N26 at least half to Austria.
Okay, I see. They made the step very early to Germany, and Revolut from the UK. And I mean, there is one player in Switzerland called Neon. I would bet nobody really knows them. The Swiss ones might know them, or no, people from knowing or are familiar a bit more with the Swiss market might know them. But I mean, they have published numbers as well, and they have not yet made the step abroad. I'm not sure whether they really wanted to, but I mean, they will never have the potential to become or to get to the size of a Revolut or an N26 by staying in Switzerland, quite obviously. I mean, this might just support the thesis. That was just an idea.
Well, if you look at Bitpanda on the other side, which is a startup from Austria, not a bank in a traditional way, but in the finance sector, quite strong and going global at the moment. So they start expanding very fast. So maybe there are other examples as well. But Mona, maybe one question in your direction, and then to the two gentlemen. Maybe it's also about culture. So if there is no thing about small and big, I mean, I think of some small countries like, as you already mentioned, Sweden, Nordics, Israel. And then there are other small countries without any unicorns at all. Maybe it's also a question of culture within small countries, whether they become successful in developing global players in the digital economy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one very important part is the culture of failure. And that's something that we still need to work on a lot. For example, in Austria, I'm not sure actually how that's in Switzerland, so curious to hear your thoughts. But in other countries, if you founded a startup that miserably failed, that would rather be considered a benefit if an investor looks at you in evaluating you, because you would assume that you don't do the same mistakes twice. And in Austria, I mean, investors have the same mindset, obviously. But people think that if you failed once, you shouldn't try again, because that failure is just something that's going to prevent you from attracting investors or maybe even people that want to work for you in the future. So I think that's a very important part. And then culture within companies, I think, is actually insanely important in early stages. And that's something that I actually see as something, for example, where in Austria we actually have a benefit in terms of hiring, because it's typically very easy for us to attract good talent from Eastern European countries, which actually like to move to Austria because it's a very livable place. And I think that it's becoming less and less important to be exactly where your customer is, because the pandemic has really sort of accelerated the digitization of sales processes. So a lot of things that we previously thought we'd never be able to do without a physical meeting are now just casually happening on Zoom every day. But I think it's becoming very important to be close to where you can find the best talent. And I'm a firm believer of remote first, but I don't think remote only is going to work for startups, especially in earlier stages, because you really need to build a strong culture of being agile, of being able to communicate very efficiently. And from what I've seen, it's very tough to do that if everyone is remotely spread around the world, or spread around Europe for that matter. So that's my two views on culture.
So what's the culture like in Switzerland?
Well, I'm a bad reference. I'm among a lot of entrepreneurs. So for us, failing is something you're talking about. It's something that's not really considered a bad thing necessarily, even though you really do not want. But I think in general, absolutely, I fully agree. It's the same in Switzerland, I would say. Certainly not like in the US, accept it, start again, try again, the next one will work. It's more like, you might want to go back to UBS or Credit Suisse until you turn 65 and then you're retired.
Philipp, maybe one question about something which a lot of young people are totally used to, but maybe especially with a company with such a long history. European Union, European market, is this something where this difference between small country, big country became less and less important because we are part of one united Europe. And so this is something where you say, okay, doesn't matter, borders don't matter anymore. So it doesn't matter whether I'm in Salzburg or in Munich, because yesterday you say you just drove over 1.5 hours with a car over here. So is there still some barriers between the countries of European Union from your perspective or not?
So, of course, it's bitter when it sinks in that you're not considered to be upon the younger ones anymore. So, but
no, your company, not you.
No, but it's also true for me when you talk about the European Union. When I was a kid traveling from Salzburg to Munich, there was a real border with border patrol, and of course also on the economical side. We had this fragmented market, which back then I didn't realize when I was sitting on the back seat. But to answer your question, I do think that this has helped a lot for the entire continent to grow together as one single market. And but in my personal view, this should just be like the beginning of the story. And when we look back maybe 30 years from now, we should say in 2022, the integration of becoming one Europe was just at the start, so to say. So I think yes, it has helped a lot, and it has helped, I think, every market in the EU, but we still need to go a lot further in the economical integration, in the political integration, in the integration of the mindsets. We've seen two different movements, like the nationalist movement in many countries, not only in Europe. But also a lot of young people who feel they are born as Europeans and also are happy to move around within the EU. And in Salzburg, in our head office, we've got 25 nations under one roof, and I think that's a brilliant thing. I enjoy every day when I walk in the office, and also coming back to the culture thing. Then this also impacts like how we experience our corporate culture, and even if like on the one hand in a digital world location does not matter too much often, having a home does matter, and you experience it privately when you've spent many days in a row in various hotels and coming back home. And I also think we experienced this in a corporate context, that it's nice to have a home as a company somewhere where you meet your colleagues and have a place where you can feel at home, and then go out in the world again and try to do your stuff there.
We only have 1 minute left, so I actually wanted to ask some questions in the room. Are there any contributions? I mean, there are a lot of Austrians and Swiss, I guess, in the room, probably. No? Then I will ask the last question to you, maybe, Philipp. Switzerland, something where everybody's thinking about what this country has done for the past decades to be the best example for being on your own. And doing is this culture in the young generation changing? So, for example, do you feel in your peer group, yes, we want to become part of the European Union, we want to be part of this one Europe, or is this still we want to be what we are on our own, and we want to contribute to European markets, but we want to stay independent?
Yeah, that's a tough one, really tough one. I mean, from a business perspective, the European Union is great. We were long thinking about whether we would not even offer our cards in Switzerland, because honestly, yeah, you can decide whether you want to build up your card business in the EU or in Switzerland, and I mean, effort is pretty much the same. Target market, not really. So, I mean, it was quite obvious for us to start very early in the EU, because, I mean, you have so many opportunities, countries. From a business perspective, I mean, I'm very sure that there is a need to make sure that we are part of harmonizing. From a cultural perspective, I think it's a bit a different story. That will take a couple of more years.
Thank you very much for being with us today. I hope we gave you some impressions of those little Austrian and Switzerland perspectives here. Thanks to Steffi, she's not here in the room yet, but the idea of bringing some small countries to this conference is a very good one, and thank you for contributing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.